This evening's program on the state of affordable housing in our county is co-sponsored by the League and the Ellensburg Public Library. We thank them for providing this venue. Our speakers this evening are Sarah Bedsaul, Chair of the Ellensburg Affordable Housing Commission, Dave Sturgell, Vice Chair of the Kittitas County Homeless and Affordable Housing Committee and an affordable housing advocate, Susan Grindle from Hopesource, and we have also invited Stephanie Bohman from the Kittitas Habitat for Humanity. We hope she can make it. After their presentations, we'll have a question and answer period. So please hold your questions or write them on the papers that are at your table, and we can bring them up later. And please join me in welcoming our speakers.
The way our slides are arranged, I'll give some brief introductory remarks. Thank you, Charlie. I'm Dave Sturgell, and I've been living in Ellensburg for 11 years now. I came here straight out of the Navy to get an education degree at Central, and since then we've loved it and we've stayed. For about 5 years, I've been on the county's Affordable Housing and Homeless Committee, which awards a substantial amount of money for housing projects. The chair of the committee is one of our county commissioners, and I'm the vice chair, which is as high as a citizen can rise in the committee structure. We're here to speak about affordable housing, and I want to very briefly cover just a few things. Our sources of information mainly come from Washington State Department of Commerce, especially their Affordable Housing Advisory Board. A lot of the numbers are set by HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. Today I'll be talking about an internet rental company that, because of their search capabilities, has really unlimited housing information that they're willing to share with people at this time. And of course, the county, the city, that's where a lot of our stuff comes from. HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, sets an annual statistic called area median income. That's how much, for one example, a family of 4 might make here. You're going to be surprised what the county area median income is. I believe that it's spillover from Suncadia and Seattle tech jobs because it's very high. The Kittitas County area median income is $97,200 for a family. I'm going to just kind of buzz on through some of these statistics, but anyone who's a data nerd like me, please come up and talk to me, and I'll embrace you as a brother or a sister. Also, you're going to see some handouts from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and I've put those out on the table where our city representatives are, that table in the middle there. And Jeremy and Dan, if you guys just raise your hand. If any of you want any of those, they're on the table. I made several copies. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board does a lot of research in the state. It's funded by the Department of Commerce. This is a report that's so new it hasn't even been released, but they released it to me, showing the makeup of Kittitas County. And some of the important takeaways are population 47,000. That's actually a concern as we grow, because if we go over 50,000, and we will soon, we'll technically no longer be a rural county, so we'll lose access to some funding. About 19,000 total households within the county, and I don't remember what that other number is, I'm sorry. About 5,600 income restricted, or people that need affordable housing. Again, I made a few copies of these because there is a ton of data in this stuff. And I'd be happy to show you where to find it when that report gets released, which is supposed to be any day now. They go so far as to break things down by income. One of the other real important takeaways is that they've determined that Kittitas County in the next 20 years needs an additional 5,200 units of affordable housing. And they have access to research that's even broken that down. Some of it needs to be permanent supportive housing for highly disabled people. Some of it needs to be 50% of the AMI number, and so on and so forth. More numbers. This is just kind of a general overview. I'd like to talk to you about a company called Dwellsy. They're an internet company and they have excellent search capabilities. They're probably using some form of AI. But what they can do, because they're computer programmers, is they can go out on the internet and they can look at every single rental listing in the country. Because of that, they have access to information that no one else does, and they share it with housing advocates. I think I just said whatever that slide says. In the last year, they reported that Ellensburg had the #3 highest rental increase in the entire nation over a 1-year period for a 1-bedroom apartment. In the nation. If you're curious about what the two that beat us out were, it was Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Corpus Christi, Texas. I made sure that that got into the Daily Record. Our Daily Record person is here now. So I made sure when that report came out in July that it got into the Daily Record. But it's gotten worse since July. In July, it was a 36% rent increase over a 1-year period. But because Dwellsy's so good, they're continuously updating their data. Let me make sure I have the right slide. It's gone up since then. From October 22 to October 23, a 1-bedroom apartment rental in Ellensburg has gone up 57%. An actual dollar increase of more than $340, and according to them, 1-bedroom apartment in Ellensburg rents for $944 a month. There are 2 local funds for affordable housing. These are driven by various state laws and sales tax initiatives. I'm going to speak about the county fund. Sarah's going to speak about the city. County funds, since almost 20 years, have been taken out small numbers for sales tax in the city, but in the county, that's from a document recording fee. Whenever a mortgage or other financial instrument trades hands, $100 of it goes into the county's affordable housing and homeless fund. And one of the other requirements that the state puts on the county is if you're going to use those money, you have to come up with a comprehensive plan to address homeless and affordable housing. With the recognition that Hopesource is the de facto housing provider for affordable housing in the county delegates that to Hopesource. They're very good about anyone who wants to be on the committee to come up with that plan. The plan that Hopesource comes up with is very practical and sometimes a little discouraging because it's practical. For instance, the Hopesource plan only has us building 5 additional units of homeless housing per year, whereas the state is saying that's maybe not enough. But on the other hand, it's practical. I will tell you that the county fund, county committee, citizen committee, here's the composition of it. The county commissioner who oversees this is Laura Oshaditz. I'm the vice chair, and we have a number of other people on the committee. It's typical committee structure. Now the important stuff. We don't really have power unless we know about the money behind everything. So I want you to know what each of these funds currently has in it. The Low Income Housing Fund has more than $660,000 in it, and the Homeless Fund, $856,000. I know that's a lot of numbers, and I'm sorry, but I wanted to give a very brief overview. And with that, let's switch things over and hear how things are done at the city.
So I understand, Sarah, my slides. I didn't memorize them quite as well. I think as he did. I have a loud voice. I think so. I mean, most people in the room, I think, know who I am. So I'm very passionate about affordable housing. I talk very fast, and I've been here more than 11 years, and I'll go ahead and reveal my age, but I've been here in this community for 48 years. So I'm local, I'm born and raised, and have been working at this particular issue, I feel like, for more than 11 years, very, very possibly. So really brief background, besides being born here, worked for the Public Health Department for many years, worked at my own affordable housing community land trust project for 2 years. Have some pretty good partners in the room here tonight that worked pretty hard on that for me. That project did not succeed. And so I joined my husband in doing home inspections for several years and am now currently a real estate broker. So in other words, in many ways, I've been engaged and involved in housing and homes in this valley for a really long time. So beginnings, right? In 2017, the city of Ellensburg put together a housing needs assessment. Burke put they hired a consulting firm, did a huge, right, assessment of our community and found that our housing costs are too high, right? Our vacancy rates are low. We have many cost-burdened households. We have a mismatch of unit size to household size. So in other words, we're building a ton of single-family homes for people who need one-bedroom apartments or two-bedroom apartments, or maybe they don't want the yard, they don't want the acreage, they don't want the responsibility, okay? Lack of multifamily housing options ties right into that. Our students really muck up our data, okay? So we have, that's a really simple, everything I'm saying, by the way, is gonna be fast and very simplified, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but they really muck it up because they're hard to capture, they're a big population, they cruise everywhere, some are on couches, 10 might live in a house, we don't really know. We have lots of them though that are really at risk for being homeless and not having a secure, safe place that they feel like they can stay in. But they're hard to nail down, right, to get that data. And then we have this increase in our elderly population, again, that maybe want to downsize. Maybe we need to be thinking about homes that are multi-generational, that have, you know, 2 primaries on a main level so that we can have family members move in with us, right? So that's some of the basic stuff, big overview that they found. So the city of Ellensburg responded to that report and said, okay, we've got to do something about it, and the citizens in the city of Ellensburg voted, right? And approved this 0.1 sales tax to try and address some of the issues that we had. And this is the RCW. So this RCW basically says, in this money that we collect, this is what we can do with that money, right? So this is all the big fancy words, but we can construct or acquire affordable housing. This could include emergency transitional supportive housing, okay, new units of affordable housing within an existing structure, okay, and facilities providing housing related services or acquiring land in order to construct something that's going to be for affordable housing. We can also address behavioral health related facilities or acquire land for that purpose, and funding and operations and maintenance costs of new units of affordable housing and facilities where housing related programs are provided, okay, or newly constructed evaluation and treatment centers. And that's where we start to get these partnerships with agencies like Hopesource that's here tonight. So within that RCW, they also said, hey, you have to address certain populations, okay? And these are the populations in which we are supposed to be focusing. And it just so happens that our top 2 in our needs assessment, right, our single family households, our elderly populations fall underneath this. So we've got behavioral health, disabilities, veterans, senior citizens, homeless, at risk for being homeless, families, children, unaccompanied homeless youth or young adults, persons with disabilities, and domestic violence survivors, okay? And then we have a small pot of money that can also be used for operation, delivery, or evaluation of behavioral health treatment programs or services. So that's a lot of words, right? But I think it's important to understand that the money that we collect falls under a specific RCW and it can only be used in certain ways. And so we're trying to go out to the community, right, and say, okay, community people out there, come to us with programs and projects, right, that we can say, yes, it falls underneath this guideline and we can give you money. So after we pass, right, the sales tax and we start collecting money, then the city says, okay, well, now we have to come up with a housing action plan, right? We've got to say, okay, so the city council makes a resolution, the housing action plan gets put into place. I'm pretty sure this was Burke as well, council member, yes, okay, we're nodding. And what that did was say, okay, we have 3 big goals, right? We have to produce more housing. We have to add a variety of housing stock, and we have to preserve and create income-restricted affordable housing, which ties directly back into all of our data and ties back into all of our funding, right? So we're on a good road to hoe, 2021. So then the city said, okay, well, we've got some land, right, that we're willing to surplus and we're willing to contribute to this effort to try and get people interested and able to do some of these projects, right? So we have the Water Street location, which is currently being developed. That's Habitat for Humanity. So at the very end of Water, boom, you hit Bender, and there it is, right? Straight ahead of you. And I was really hoping they were going to be here tonight to talk a little bit more about that project because I want to say it's 18. Thank you. Data guy. Yeah, we need our data guys. So 18 houses, and they're going up fairly quickly, and it's looking really nice up there. So that's for those of us that since 2017 on that first committee have been trying, right, to get anything on the ground and anything going, like to hit the end of that road and see that project just is like, woohoo, feels great. We have First and Pine as a location, and right now that property is not committed to a project and is actually open for an RFP or a request for funds, right? A proposal. So we would love for somebody to come and say, hey, you know, let's do a project here. Now, our commission met with City Council recently and really are making a strong argument to say, hey, in that location, even though some people might not like it, we'd like to have the highest density we can possibly have. We need units. And we need as many units as we can possibly get, obviously based off the data that you just heard. And so on that property, our commission has really said, hey, we want to see max capacity, the most units we can fit. And then we have Catherine Park. So Habitat for Humanity has currently put in a project for a townhouse style that we're really, cottage style housing, okay? That we're really working with them to try and maximize. We've got some wetland issues on there, and so we're working through that process. So none of these things are ever easy, but these are the land projects. Now with the city and land only, they're saying, listen, you have to hit 80% of that area median income. Now the city of Ellensburg's area median income is a little bit different than the counties, right? Because we don't take into account Suncadia. And our latest data that I could find was only 2021. So it was around 47,000. Okay, now that could have changed a lot since 2021, but I couldn't find any more recent data than that. So if you want access to this sales tax money, right, to do a project, and you can combine both. So we've had projects that come to the city and say, hey, we'd really like to utilize your land, but we also want to have some money, right? So then they have to hit both the 80% of area median income and the 60%. But if you're coming at us for just money, then whatever you're doing has to hit that 60% of area median income, okay? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about our money. So we have a lot of money, right? And we would love to start giving some of this money away to projects that could start addressing affordable housing in Kittitas County. So this cash investments on hands, a little over $2.6 million, okay, with that smaller fund that I talked about being at almost, 264 and change. We have certain money's allocated, right? So to Habitat's project, right, we have some allocated funds over there at 705. We've got some allocated funds, but uncommitted funds, right? $1.6 million, right? And this is accruing right now, currently, about $60,000 a month, over $60,000 a month. So our goal, I think right now as a commission, is trying to really work at figuring out how can we get more people interested in developing and building projects for affordable housing. And it's a really complicated issue. It's not a simple issue right now. We've partnered with nonprofits, right? And the way that they are able to do projects is through what's called layered funding. And then, so they take housing trust fund dollars, and they take, grants, and they take all these other monies, and they layer those monies, and those come in at certain times for application processes, and it draws out the project, right? Because they have to, in order to get this money, I got to show that I had this money, right? So they get this money and they apply, and then they say, okay, well, this funding only starts in 2 years. So that's why you see some of the time lag happen with nonprofits, because it's really hard. And they have a lot of restriction. Susan might or may not, depends, talk to some of this, but there's just a lot of restrictions that comes with that. They have to follow a lot of rules, and there's a lot of reporting, and there's a lot of evaluation. So we've been working really hard to try and figure out ways to partner with private developers to try and get some of this work done. But that has proven to have some of its own challenges, right? So that's kind of where we are. So that's the city kind of synopsis, and I think we're just about right on time. So you want Susan to take her time to talk about the project, and then we can answer questions? Okay.
If I stand up, can you still hear me, or do I have to hold that way?
It would help if you had a microphone.
Is it clear? Is this on?
Yes.
Yes. All right. All right. I'm Susan Grindle. I'm CEO of Hopesource, and I was born and raised here.
That happens sometimes.
I'm third generation, and my kids are fourth generation, and my grandkids are fifth generation in the valley. So I have a vested interest in the health of what happens in this county. Hopesource, the mission of Hopesource is to intentionally invest in struggling families and individuals to help them find a better life. Nobody woke up one morning and said, you know what? I think I'd like to be homeless. Doesn't happen that way. They weren't born that way. They don't wake up suddenly and want to be that. Given the right help, an incredibly large percent of them are willing to move on and can move on to live decent lives. And that's what we find. We operate on something called a hand up, not a handout. And what that means is that when someone comes in who doesn't have a home or is being evicted from their home, or needs help because they are in a home but they can't afford anything else. They can't afford medicine, they can't afford school supplies, they can't afford that. It's all the same struggle, it's all the same trauma. So we equip them with skills to move forward. Hope University is one of our divisions, and that gives life skills like budgeting, pretty basic budgeting, all sorts of credit and debt. And then we encourage them. We have case advocates who come alongside them, stay with them through the hard times until they get to the good times for a better tomorrow. And we empower them to go out on their own. We are a hand up. We aren't a hand forever. So we expect the first thing that will happen after someone is housed is that they begin looking for a job. They have a job, then they have a choice. It does come in and out. Then they have a choice more education, a better job, and that kind of thing. So they do move on. Now, we work in 6 counties: Kittitas, Grant, Adams, Chelan, Douglas, and Okanagan. And we run about 6,000 people a year who come in and need this kind of help. And we can prepare them, we can educate them, we can encourage them, and if they go out and there's no housing, well, that's the rest of the story. When, in 2007, an investor came to town, a developer, I should say, and as you said, it's a stack of money you have to accrue. So an investor who's doing tax credits with the Housing Trust Fund is also doing, you have to have private investors, you have to have housing tax funds, hopefully you get money from the legislature, which we've been fortunate to do. And you have to often, as we have had to do, is to take loans out ourselves. Put skin in the game and buy a property or buy something. When it's completed, we'll get our money back. I mean, we don't have deep pockets, but we do have good reputation with the bank, so we do that. Well, in 2007, the developer came to town, and in order to do tax credits, which is that money stack, you have to have a nonprofit as your partner. And that investor developer had 15 different nonprofits come and hear what he had to say. And when he was done, 14 of them went away, and we went, we want that. At that point in time, we had one property, Westview Villa in Cle Elum, that was built in 2002. And we had a family. Can I just talk loud? I can actually just talk louder. No? The back of the room says no. All right, now is that, we'll try this one. And so, as a result of that, since 2007, we have either purchased existing apartment buildings, renovated them, they are like brand new builds when we're done, or we have built new. And we now have we own and operate more affordable housing in Central Washington than anybody else. We have 900 units of affordable housing. Because if we are working with 6,000 people that need housing or need to be kept from having to fall into homelessness, then we also have the services to help them, but we have a house to send them to many times. And what we've created is we have in Kittitas County 261 units of affordable housing. And you'll recognize some of the Westview Villa, Cle Elum, Hampton Court, which is on University, Penn Place, which is a senior housing in Roslyn, Windsor Park, which is a family housing on Cherry, Huntington 1 and 2, which are on Cherry and Pine. Our brand new build, you probably saw in the paper, Sperling Court, was 40 beautiful units up on Rainier. Jack's Place on Cora was a deal with a private person who had built 7 houses for his son, and then his son did not want to manage property, and so he gave us a screaming deal that we could afford to pay back over about 20 years. But that's the kind of investment that we have to make. We bought the Paul Ann, that's the brick one right on the Memorial Pool Park. And that is a shelter. We also just finished Pine Place, which is on Pine Street, right behind the police department. That build was because Frank Chott got us an appropriation for $2.3 million to build it, and Primera Insurance Company gave us $280,000 to furnish it. Those are the partnerships you need in order to increase housing stock. But I have to tell you, it starts in one really important place. If you do not have strong commitment monetarily from your county or your cities, you are not going to get enough points to make it over the bar to get housing trust funds. Our county has been extremely generous since 2007, helping us with seed money. I think the first time we asked the county, we weren't very new at it, and so we said we just need 200,000 at that and put that in there. But we kept making progress. They saw the progress. We could show the outcomes. We could show the impact on the community. And so Tiana Way is our newest build going up in Cle-Elum. And the county was the first one to step up and say, we'll pledge $750,000 for it. That gave us enough points to go over. And then Senator Murray and Representative Schreier managed to get us money, $3.2 million, to add to the pot going up. And so we've had a lot of good participation from our legislators in Washington State, both at the federal level and the state level. And the county and the city, we did a county-city property where it's on Pearl. So it is a city and the county both participated equally in funding the base of that thing. That's what you have to have if you're going to have affordable housing. So the other thing that I think is important to know, not only do we need housing for the clients we work with, but we built what's called a pipeline to prosperity. Because when you're homeless, you don't just go from the street to a nice apartment. You don't know how. So we have a pipeline. If you're homeless, we might put you in a motel for a couple of weeks while you stabilize and then go into a shelter. Or an enhanced shelter, which means it has more services. You might go from there to transitional housing. And once you've gotten better at that, then you'll move on to some of the affordable housing. And finally, we try very hard then to go out to the market. So our objective is, if you can, we want you to be able to move through that and then rent in the market, be self-sufficient. We'll be there for you if you stumble, but to go and to be independent. And the way we know whether anybody that we have used that process with was successful is that the state keeps a scorecard of everyone in a system called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. If somebody that we think we don't see anymore, so we think, well, they must have been able to function on their own. If they don't show up in any other database in the state, we know we're successful. Because if they enter any other homeless system in the state, it will show up. So I'm very happy to tell you that our success rate, once we bring people in, is north of 80%. Never come back in the system. Now there's another group of people that usually communities don't like to talk about, and that's supportive housing, permanent supportive housing for people who, for whatever reason, one reason or another, will never be able to make that curve. Mental deficiency, a disability, just things that they can't overcome. And then the best thing is to help them move into a place where they can be kept track of forever. Now, all of the properties that I talked about, once they become one of our properties, they are affordable housing in the true sense, because you know, sometimes people build affordable housing that's not really. But this is truly affordable housing that people can get in. So that is, that's our big goal. We do all the programs. We run the buses, you see them. We have a food bank in Upper County. We do all the social determinants of health. So we have weatherization, we have energy, we have Hope University, we have case management, and we have education. But it's wrapping our arms around a person in a way that allows them to move slowly, as fast as they can, into independence. But it depends on having a house to put put them in. Without that, they can't stabilize. If you don't have an address and you don't have a house, you cannot stabilize your life. You cannot do it. And so that's why we're so invested in the affordable housing still and always will be.
Thank you. If you have a question, would you raise your hand and we could...
Dave was saying if he knows a little bit about the Habitat project, if you want to have a...
Oh, that would be lovely, Dave.
And then maybe about the project that he's been working on.
Sure.
I'm just going to take a couple more minutes. Because I've been involved, I can speak a little bit about what Habitat's doing. I guess their person's stuck in traffic or something. And like Susan said, it's at the corner of Bender and Water, or at the intersection of Bender and Water. The development is called Stewart Meadows, and it's 18 units. And it's designed, as Susan said, to try and bring people from affordable housing into more market rate housing so that they're not going to be in this permanent state their whole lives. Similar to a community land trust, but slightly different legally. And that's something that we really have tried. As much as we love Hopesource, we want housing providers other than Hopesource. We don't want there to be a monopoly on affordable housing. And Susan doesn't want that either, I don't think.
I don't.
So we tried for years and years. We finally got Habitat for Humanity to bite and make that commitment. Once our local habitat merged with the King County habitat, it really became possible for that. A second project that I'd like to tell you about is, I will be honest with you, I've been doing this for so many years and it has created such an anger within me that I decided in order to solve this problem, I would become a housing developer. And so I found a landowner, and it's the Oddfellows Cemetery, and they have committed on 10 acres to build one phase. They're going to develop the land slowly of 20 housing units, affordable housing units. So we are trying to get that out to more and more people. Infrastructure is the most important part, the most expensive part of any project. And that Oddfellows housing project that I'm involved with, separate from my county assignment, has recently put in a infrastructure grant requesting $2 million to develop that 10 acres south of the cemetery on Brick Road.
Just phase one, right?
That's just a phase one. Then next year we will ask for $5 million from the State Housing Trust Fund. That can, depending on how we plan things and depending on what construction prices are, that will build between 20 and 30 units of affordable housing. We've decided that there'll be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. 15 of them will go to veterans and 15 of them will go to general workforce or of general affordable housing. People who are need of housing assistance but are still working within the community. So those are 2 other projects I did want to mention to get, and now between the city, the county, Hopesource, Habitat, and the Oddfellows, you guys know everything about affordable housing in Kittitas County. Or at least you've made a good start.
Yeah.
Could I ask one of you to explain to the audience what the Housing Trust Fund is?
I can't. And can we have a nonprofit housing developer here. This is Korbie Jorgensen Haley, and she is with a nonprofit housing developer based in Yakima. Over the last 40 years, they've housed almost 11,000 people, mainly here in Eastern Washington. So Korbie, can you tell us that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Korbie Jorgensen Haley. I'm the director of...
Korbie, you can have a microphone.
That's okay. So I'm with the Office of Rural and Farmworker Housing. We are nonprofit developer consultants. Our office is in Yakima. We've been around for 42 years now. We do not own and operate housing. We work with nonprofits and public housing authorities as their developer, because as they said, affordable housing development is very specific and it's a unique skill set. So if you only develop housing once every 3 or 5 or 10 years, you don't have the staff to, with the knowledge base to do that. So that's where we come in. We're developer consultant. So the Housing Trust Fund is with the Washington State Department of Commerce. It's funded with the capital budget, on the biennium, and it is primarily grants for affordable housing development. It's mostly multifamily. They do have a home ownership component, but it's funded, every 2 years. We had a really big funding amount last year. But one thing to keep in mind is you'll see in Delaware $200 million, right, for the Housing Trust Fund. But what part of that you can use in a place like Kittitas County is really like 15 million, right? Because a certain amount of it is for transit-oriented development. That doesn't work outside Seattle, right? A certain amount of it is just for permanent supportive housing where you have to do at least 50 units, but that doesn't work here, right? And it's all for specific populations. It's very much siloed, right?
Divided. Pots are divided.
Yeah, for specific populations. So for counties like Kittitas, which I live here in Ellensburg, it's really hard to find the right money that fits. So when there's 200 million, we're really only viable, for a tiny portion of that. And it's competitive. So they put out a NOFA. Developers like myself and Hopesource and other groups, we put together applications which take a minimum of 6 months, usually like a year to 18 months for prep to get that application. They get twice the applications for money that they have, right? So they'll get 150 applications. They can fund 75. You spend 25 to 50 grand getting to an application, and then it often takes multiple funding rounds to be successful. And they were talking about the funding stack. So that would be one layer, right? So you get that. You can't build anything now for $5 million, right? And I don't know if you guys are paying attention to the cost of construction. I think, we're in the high 380s, a square foot right now for the cost of construction, and that's without certain prevailing wage requirements. So you really have to layer the funding. And one of the problems is everybody wants to be the last money in, right? Nobody wants to give you money until you're fully funded. Somebody has to be the first money, right? Somebody has to come in first. And I know you guys didn't ask me to be here, but I want to say, I think the best use of the city and county money is to be the first money in, because nobody wants to do it, and it's the hardest money to find, and you need that first investment to, like with the Oddfellows, right? We need the civil to know, okay, what kind of pipes do we need, to run out there? How much money do we need for the CHIP grant, right? You need a survey, and you need an architect, and you need a phase 1 environmental study. You might need a wetland study. Nobody is lining up to pay for that, right? So the cities and counties are really essential to put that money in first, before they know you're going to be successful or not, right? Somebody has to step in, right? And then you have a better chance for a successful project.
Well, they'll look at it. Yeah, so they'll if you bring a project to them and they don't see that you have community support for that project, then your application goes to the bottom of the pile, right? That you have to be able to show that you have community buy-in, that you have community support for this project that you're looking to do. And so that shows oftentimes in that first buy-in of the monies that you have.
Yeah, question, what constitutes community support? What do you jump into that bar?
Susan talked a little bit about points, and I think it's not a simple grading system, right? So they're going to look at everything from money support, services support, do you have land secured to actually do this project? Those are the three that come to mind really quickly. I mean, they want to see a comprehensive project that in their mind they can see one reaching the finish line, because that's the number one thing, is that they don't want to take money away from the other stack of projects, right, that they're saying no to, and give it to you to have you not reach the finish line and actually build out what you said you were going to build out. And so they have to, that application has to very clearly lay out how you're going to bring this project all the way to completion and house these people, and then how are you then going to maintain it, ensure that the people that continue to live there and rotate in and out of that are still in the demographics that you said they were going to be in. So what are your screening tools? Who do you have on board in your community to help you, right? Ensure that your renters or homeowners, right, stay within those income guidelines as far as staying affordable. So there's just, it's a long-term plan that you're giving them, if that. So there's points to all of that.
And I don't know what the threshold is, because what you do is try and get as much participation as you can, and you apply, and they'll tell you if you don't have enough points. And then you know, I got to go back out and get more support so that next time I can get above that threshold, whatever that is. So it isn't scientific for sure. One of the things that we run into right now with the like the Housing Trust Fund and others is that they are West Side centric, so they're metro centric, and they're looking at the types of housing and the types of projects that work best in metropolitan areas. And the reason that's an issue for us is that until very, very recently, if you wanted to get that money, you had to have 100% of your units homeless. And then it was 50% of your units had to be homeless. And the last time we put in a project, we said we aren't going to go for that kind of fund because we know we have all of the housing. We are what's called functional zero for homelessness of veterans and families with children. And what that means is there is enough housing and help that a person can get the help if they want it, functionally. The system is functional. Whether or not everybody takes advantage of it is another thing. And so we know that we are built at the top of what we need in this county right now and probably for a couple more years. If we build more homeless units, they will stay empty, which means revenue that doesn't come in, or people that decide they like those units too and they move from somewhere else. And we're interested in housing the people that live here first. So that's something we're working with, and you're right, we're in our third round Housing Trust Fund on the Teanaway project. And so you just keep at it until you wear them down, I guess.
Yep, Mary?
I don't know a ton about Stewart Meadows. What I've heard is that it's similar to a community land trust.
It's very similar.
So Korbie, the professional here, is saying that it's shared appreciation.
They can get a percentage of the appreciation, but a certain amount goes back to habitat. So if you want them to be able to earn equity in their home, but they don't earn it, that's been put on the market. Because the goal is if somebody sells their home, they want them to sell it to them with equity that means that's for a home ownership opportunity. So it's not a one and done, it's in perpetuity.
It was the issue I had when I was on the Habitat for Humanity, was the fact that I couldn't even understand that they had a lot of people's hands, but they couldn't live there for 2 years with this crazy market.
They-
Years, they were wanting to sell, you know what I mean?
Yeah. They-
Without suddenly having a huge amount of equity.
Yeah, they changed that. It used to be that way, Mary, but they've changed that, the way that they function drastically. It's very much, it's very, very similar to community land trust. So in other words, so the homeowner does never own the land. They own and gain equity in the house, right? And so that in and of itself, in terms of the market that we deal with, right? Like if you're gonna go sell a house, but you're just selling the house and not the land. I mean, just look at Rosewood is not a great example because they have really high lease rates. And in this situation, when you're dealing with like Habitat, your lease rate is gonna be low to non-existent versus $800 a month or whatever, but they don't, right? They're not selling the land and the house together. And typically Habitat's involved in helping ensure that the next right family that comes in is, yeah. So it's much different than it was before.
Robbie?
I have a question. How do you evaluate need? How do you, maybe you have 4 units and there are 5 families that are asking for 4 units. How do you determine how to
Well, generally speaking, it is you apply and it's first come unless they don't meet the criteria, and then you can go to the next and to the next. So it's not a matter of making a lot of qualifications like that, although we do have a priority, and the priority is, and we work with the police department on this, if there's a woman with a child on the street at midnight, the police know to come and bring her and her child to us. Those are protected classes. So if somebody is, a woman with children, she's going to be probably further up on the list, but she still has to apply and get on the list and make sure she's attentive to the process. So there are some considerations, but you really do just, they have to be willing to come and do the work of getting their application in, of showing up for their interviews, for doing the things that it needs to be done, because if they don't, you can't do that for them. They obviously, unless they're unable, you understand that. If they're unable, they're going to get help. But if they are able and they aren't making their effort, then, that's not something that we probably would put on a priority.
And I know Habitat has their own screening tool, and I'm familiar enough to chat about it, but I know that they put applicants for their projects through a pretty specific application process.
And some people say, aren't you in competition with Habitat? And the answer is an easy one, no. They are home ownership or renters. So there's no competition at all. It's, as you suggested, it's our hope that they can move through our system into something like a Habitat house.
And then into... Don't, Mary.
Okay, so the question in the back.
Yeah, so this is for Susan. How do you keep affordable housing rentals affordable in the long term? Because obvious question.
How do we keep it affordable?
Yeah, how do you over the long term? How do you keep the rent at a certain amount that they can continue to pay for it, or people can continue to pay for that?
You have to have, the rent has to be able to pay for the building, obviously. And so you might see the rent be adjusted every 5 years because the economy has adjusted. But the people who are in affordable housing that are real affordable housing, and I say that because I know some affordable housing is called that, and it's really not. It's a title, but it isn't the 30%, 50%, 80% area median income. So again, that's that pipeline I talked about. So people that are in affordable housing are going to be employed or have disability or have some sort of payment, and they never will pay more than 30% of their income. So that's part of the scale, 30% of their income. But as they increase their employment, if they can, then they're going to be able to, they'll probably get over the top of that AMI bar, the 30-40%, which means they've moved on to being able to afford something closer to a market. So someone else comes in and they're going to be at that base level of 30% again. So it's a matter of It's not permanent housing. I mean, you can live there as long as you want, but you are expected to pay a certain percent of your income. If your income's $100, you're going to pay $30. If your income's $200, you're going to pay more. It's that kind. Does that answer it?
Well, I guess I was thinking more of you as an owner of these rentals, Hopesource, and so you have a certain amount of income. Are there grants that are helping offset? Because you obviously have to pay back loans. So how do you pay back the loans and pay all the things if that's as all rentals are at a certain level? I'm picturing a gap there.
No, I hear what you're saying now. No, a property, before you start operating it, you have to fund reserves. And you have to keep those reserves funded through the rents. And it's either a rent that a person's paying because they're employed, or it's rent we're paying through a grant. So one way or the other, that money's going to go into the property. We know what the budget is, so you take a certain amount for the operating costs, and the rest goes into reserve. And that's how you keep them affordable, is you've got that cushion. Sure.
So all of us, I think we were talking about like the housing trust fund and tax credit. They have a covenant they put on the property. So for example, the housing trust fund, you are committed to keep those units affordable for 40 years. Right? That's the minimum. So you can't take them to market rate. Right? There's that covenant in place. And so one of the reasons why it's so hard to get affordable housing projects off the ground is that you have to underwrite on how to operate on those limited rents. Because it's very hard to get operational support. Hopesource has a lot of vouchers and other funding sources they can use, and a lot of nonprofits don't have that. So you have to underwrite your operations, at least for 15 years, to be sustainable, while only receiving a small portion of what it would actually take, right, if that was a for-profit development. So that's one of the challenges, is you have to build your budget so that it's both realistic, right, and sustainable. And that's one of the biggest challenges, and that's one of the biggest funding gaps that's out there, is that operational support. So, but legally you're required, you're going to keep those at that AMI for a minimum of 40 years. And most nonprofits and public housing plan on doing it for 2. But you legally have to come and get it.
And the tax credit properties that we purchase and renovate to brand new are a product of that system. The investors have gotten all their tax credits out of it. They don't need it anymore. And all of the people who have money in it have gotten their money out of it. And so then it either you will buy it. If we buy it, we're going to preserve it for another 40 years. If a private developer buys it, they're going to renovate it and make it market rate. And we just entered a deal for 250. It's a beautiful complex in Sila that has 250 senior property. That if we had not entered that deal, 250 seniors would have been charged an incredible market rate in that area and would have been out of a home. So it's really, tax credits help you do that. And we couldn't do that without the county and the city behind us, for sure.
I have one more thing to add. One of the reasons I put that area median income figure right at the beginning of the slides is that's the calculation on which so much affordable housing is based. So a thing that definitely surprised me as I've been learning this over the past 7 or 8 years has been the area median income now for Kittitas County for a family of 4, as we said, that surprising number, $97,200. If affordable housing complex is renting to someone who makes 50% of area median income, that's a person that makes $48,000 a year. That's not someone on welfare, that's not a drug addict, that's not. $48,000 a year is a firefighter, or a manager at Fred Meyer, or a first-year school teacher. I know because I was a first-year school teacher recently. So that helps as the AMI changes. That helps the unit still stay sustainable. Nobody gets rich doing affordable housing, though.
Any other questions?
Quick question, based on the available funding and the forecast for continued growth here, do you think the problem's going to get worse or better in the next 10 years?
About with affordable housing?
Honestly.
Depends on if we build it or not. I mean, not us, but it just depends on whether the county chooses to build. And when I say county, I mean cities and counties, communities. Unless they choose to build affordable housing instead of second homes and, single-family homes. It's a choice. Airbnb will be like New York.
The best research.
So-
Sorry. The best research we have from the state says in the next 10 years we're going to need more than 2,000 more units of affordable housing. Right now we have, what did Susan say, 300 or 400 from Hopesource, 18 from Habitat, a few more smaller ones. So I think it is going to get worse unless we do something about it. I think this is one of the most important and critical issues facing I don't want to sound weird, but facing our entire society. There's a whole generation coming up that thinks they'll never be able to find any form of housing. We have to do something about that.
Go ahead.
So, can you use the city, there's talking about using it for like ADU funding, but the some affordable.
We haven't had anyone come forward with a project like that.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of project, I was thinking more like, either like a guaranteed loan fund or, some kind of lending product that would allow people to develop ADUs on their property, right? With either a discounted rate or someone with experience, but with income restrictions on the tenants.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture that in reality on how that would actually work in terms of trying to figure out how to monitor and and ensure that. I'm not sure. I mean, one of the things that I think the city's struggled with is trying to not become a landlord and not become a property management and not become there's a lot of things they don't absolutely positively do not want to do. And so I don't know that it's impossible. I'm looking past you, but I think it's yeah.
As a way to increase development,
Yep.
right, on a small scale that's replicable, right? You do it in many places over and over for a relatively small investment, not $5 million.
Right. And I hear what you're saying. There's a couple things that pop to my mind right away. One is that I think that you're going to find politically that is not favorable. I'm going to guess that people are going to say the city's giving money to people to build mother-in-law apartments in their backyard, right? I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but I've been in this long enough and seen enough meetings that I think that we would be pretty hard pressed to take some projects like that to city council and have city council, you know what I mean? I think one of the things that's been a struggle with this money is we've got a lot of people really concerned about, we need to really show, like, for the money that's being spent, people want to see, what are you doing with that? You know what I mean? What are you doing with that money? And I think that you're going to have folks that are going to push back against that notion. That's just my thought. I could be totally wrong, but that would be one of the things I could immediately see being a concern.
In full disclosure, I served on the Ellensburg Affordable Housing Commission from its inception for about 5 years, 6 years roughly. And one of the things we learned really early is, yeah, we have this pot of money, but there are all kinds of strings attached. As we've already discussed tonight, it goes to specific groups that they're trying to serve, a specific AMI, and also other strings like prevailing wage. So it's been very difficult to do any kind of public-private joint project because a lot of private builders can't do the prevailing wage deal. So it's not an easily solvable issue, and I think the more of us who understand just how constrained the various pots of money are, the better we can actually help the commission and the committee get us where we need to go, which is more affordable units. Any other questions?
Yes. What kind of more flexible legislation do we as citizens be advocating for? I mean, I've always come at this problem from the point of view of supply. And on the planning commission, all we heard for about 10 years was we're missing the middle. And what you all have addressed the problem really from the point of view not supply, but of demand. And it seems to me that you have difficulty satisfying demand because though you have the money, you're restricted in what you do. And those restrictions come from law. So what kind of changes in legislation would you advocate to help you?
I have one idea, and Susan mentioned this. We're different than the West Side. On the West Side, their problem is homelessness, and affordable housing is also a problem. But the legislation is tailored so that the homeless fund has more money in it than the affordable housing fund. And we often struggle on the county level to find anything that we can spend that money on. There have been several consecutive years where that fund has had more than $1 million in it, and we can't spend it because it has so many strings attached. A recognition that the West Side, the East Side is different than the West Side, and that we should be able to spend those funds a little bit differently, knowing that affordable housing is more of a problem here than homelessness, because Hopesource does a terrific job of helping anyone who wants help.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap it up so we don't keep the speakers up past their bedtime. But I'm sure they'd like to answer any questions you may have on their way out. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to Sarah and Susan and Dave for spending our time here today.